Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Cadence independent media production. Today, to put it bluntly, we're talking about what it even means to tune a tom to a pitch. Like, what does that even mean? We've got two heads tuned to two pitches, but when we hit the drum, we're hearing a third pitch. If you've ever tried to tune a tom to a certain pitch, you've experienced something along these lines. And there's some science in it, there's some intuition in it, and there's something to be said for having a destination pitch or a specific one you're trying to get when you're tuning. And we're just going to kind of take apart what you're doing to each head to ultimately land at the pitch that you're trying to get. And thanks again to our presenting sponsor, ProMark by D'Addario, for helping us out. The main thing that we're looking at here is if we tune the heads to the same pitch, we're going to get an ultimate note out of the drum that is not that note. And if we tune to differing pitches between the two heads, we're going to get a whole other note out of the drum, even if we only change one of the heads. Today, for clarity's sake, we're using a clear G2 on the top and a clear G1 on the bottom rather than coded heads, but all of this applies to whatever heads you're using. It doesn't matter what they are. This is just physics of vibrating membranes. I just used a tuner app in my phone to tune the batter and the reso to basically a G, pretty much exactly a G. So they're right in line with each other, and we're going to hit them, and then we're going to figure out what note comes out when we hit it. We have a G on top, we have a G on bottom, we're getting a B flat when we hit the drum in the center. And it is a B flat below. So you can think of this as a sixth below, or if you're just talking about the names of the notes, it's also a minor third above. And this is just physics of these two heads working against each other to ultimately make the third note, which is the tone of the drum itself when you're playing. When we think about the idea of tuning a drum to a note, the first thing we have to throw out is the idea that we're tuning the heads to the note that we want, because that's just not a thing. If you're using concert toms, it becomes a thing. But with a two-headed drum, we're sort of forcing a third note out by the way that we tune the other two heads. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave the batter at a G, and we're just going to manipulate the reso side and see what happens as we go. Ultimately, we can manipulate the actual fundamental note of the drum by only changing one of the heads. So the first thing we're going to do is bring the bottom head up 1/2 step. There are lots of mnemonic devices that you can learn about on the internet, or if you have a piano handy, that's helpful too. This is really excellent ear training. I think of the theme from Jaws when I think of a 1/2 step. So we raised the bottom head a 1/2 step. We went from a G to an A flat, and the fundamental pitch did not move a whole 1/2 step. It moved about half a 1/2 step from a B flat to like almost a B. So we didn't really get a lot of difference in pitch change this time, but the character of the sound is different now. It's got a little tiny bit of bend in it. I'm hearing a little more tone coming up out of the drum than when they were the same pitch. But it didn't really move our overall pitch very much. If you were, for instance, thinking to yourself, I really need this drum to be a B flat, but I also want to have a different interval between the heads, as you raise up the bottom head, you're going to need to lower the batter head a little bit to work your way back down to the B flat that we had before. So now the next step is what I think, it seems to be a very common interval for people when they talk about tuning toms on the internet, and that is a minor third above for the resonant head. This is a more extreme interval, so we're going to get a more extreme change. It's still not going to be a giant difference to the primary tone of the drum, but we are going to hear it go up from where it was a minute ago. So with a minor third above, G on top, B flat on the bottom, we're now getting in the neighborhood of a B. It's a little bit sharp, but it's basically a B. If I hit it really hard, it bends up to almost a C, but if you hit it soft, it's pretty close to a B. So if you're a minor third above fan, then what you can take from this is that whatever note your bottom head is, in this case it's a B flat, your overall note is going to be around a half step higher than that. So that's actually kind of useful information where, if you like a certain interval between the two heads on your toms, you can figure out what you need the top and bottom to be tuned to in order to generate the primary tone that you want. If we went further with the bottom head, we would continue forcing that pitch upward. And if you've ever heard like really dramatic pitch bend in a tom, this is that sort of thing acting up. And likewise, when they're the same pitch, there's really not a lot of bend at all. But at the same time, when they're the same pitch, the response is a little bit slower. And around between a whole step and a minor third, you start to get faster tonal response out of the tom, which is super fun, especially if you play fast stuff. And if you play really, really hard, you get kind of a fun amount of pitch bend out of the toms, but it's not like drastic. It doesn't sound like a sample or something like that. So the bottom line here is that making sure that you're going into this process knowing that the pitches of your heads are related to the pitch that the drum's going to make, but they are not actually the pitch that the drum's going to make, is super important. And also understanding that changing one head alone is going to change the overall note of the drum. The way that I would do this if I was doing it, and it's not really a thing I do often, but occasionally I get asked to tune like the floor tom to the root of the song if we're like riding on it for the whole song. I don't worry about the pitches of the two heads. I really just hit the drum in the center, look at a guitar tuner. If you're a fan of tune bots, things like that, something to just get you in the realm of knowing what note the fundamental is. And then I just tweak the batter head for feel, the reso head for tone, and I go back and forth with it until I get the note that I need. And sometimes you hit it and right away you're like, oh, it's already there. And other times it's wildly off. But in the end, there's a lot of variables interacting to ultimately make the one note that the tom is going to punch into the microphones. So don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid of unexpected intervals. I've heard of people doing a fifth between. Some people will only do exactly the same. Sometimes I put the reso under. I mean, who knows? You can do whatever you want as long as the sound makes you happy. Thanks again for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks again to our presenting sponsor, ProMark by D'Addario. If you have a system for generating certain pitches out of toms, let us know, because this is actually, for both of us here, kind of a new thing to be checking out. Normally, we're going more for like a sound than for a specific pitch. But it is fascinating, science.